All right, Kratos versus Ashura. Death Battle's gonna say Kratos. I don't really agree.
It's kind of insane how you can oversimplify Kratos' scaling, exactly, especially when you're trying to present yourself in some way of being objective. You know, so you say things like Kratos doesn't hasn't shown the ability to beat a primordial without help, like as if that matters, because you know Kratos kind of beat Zeus by himself without any help, especially in just base form alone. If we're talking about base Zeus, you know, obviously he needed the power of hope to beat, you know, Fear Zeus, but you know the Zeus that he temporarily beat before Zeus became Fear Zeus to begin with is already stronger than the Primordials, because those guys got necked by the Titans, and guess what? Zeus soloed those guys, unironically. And before you say that Zeus used the Blade of Chaos to do it, the Blade of Chaos is stated to be Zeus's concentrated power, right? And that was able to wipe out the Titans who beat the Primordials. So Kratos scales to the Primordials. That's one. And two, he doesn't need that scaling to beat Ashura, because once again he scales to Thor, who was able to splinter the World Tree in his fight with Jormungandr. And then he tries to present it in a way where he implies that Thor was weakened or not going all out against Kratos. I don't know what that's about. When, if anything, it implies the game implies that Thor is more bloodlusted and passionate about his fight with Kratos than he was with the snake, which was mostly off screen to begin with. So I don't get trying to assert, you know, the snake somehow making Thor not at full power when nothing in the fight implies that at all, right? This is the same snake that got knocked out by Boulder, who Kratos beat without help as well. So either way, Kratos scales to Jormungandr and Thor and the World Tree, which transcends time and space. That's why he beats Ashura. Ashura's scaling is poopy, right? It's just a bunch of big AoE blasts that don't mean anything. It's just popcorn stuff. Like in gameplay, he throws like stars and moons and planets. Like, okay, that's awesome. It doesn't scale the guys who created the universe by fighting or splintered a tree that transcends time and space, you know? You know, it's just a whole bunch of lore versus what's shown. Sometimes you got to take into account the lore, you know? And there's also things like, he says Ashura is like 100 billion dillion times the speed of light. It doesn't matter, right? Because once you talk about characters like Kratos, quantifiable speed is kind of irrelevant. Because even as early as the Greek saga games, he scales to the light of Helios, says he can react to it and such. That same light that could illuminate the infinite underworld, you know, infinite speed of light, and Kratos can just react to it. So Ashura could be, you know, whoever speed he said he was times like 100 billion and still be slower than Kratos. I don't understand. You know, you gotta learn power scaling, man. And you know, they usually say things like TikTok has the worst power scaling, but, you know, yikes. Be sure to check out my YouTube video for a more in-depth explanation. Should be my bio, if anything. Oh, and one last thing, my bad, chat. He said that Kratos, it's implied that there's a higher power in the Norse saga, whereas in Ashura, he beat the creator of his universe. Doesn't really matter, once again, unfortunately. Creating a universe is still not as good a feat as, you know, splintering a tree which transcends time and space. You know, that's universal versus low complex multiversal. So, yeah, Ashura scales to the top dog in all of his universe, but you know that's doesn't mean anything, because that's a feat that low tiers or mid tiers in God of War that they can replicate, you know. So once again, you got to compare verses. You know, sometimes what is presented as strong in another verse is like kind of moderately impressive in another verse.
What?
This guy said a lot of, you know, weird things during this cope session, but this point in particular points out the mental gymnastics that Ashura fans will undergo just to hype their character, right? You know, obviously they love spectacle over things like lore, which is kind of, you know, weird, because if you're going to ask the question who will win the fight, you're going to have to look at everything involving that character. That's not an opinionated question, right? That's not. That has an objective answer that's correct. So you're going to have to look in the lore, unfortunately, right? And you know, he says that Thor's hammer is just a hammer. Kratos' hammer level, apparently, to this guy. When that said hammer can splinter constructs that transcend time and space, like, unironically. I also peeped your page, and you seem to be a hater of power scaling, which is whatever. Not everyone has to jive with power scaling, but if you want to answer questions such as who will win a fight, it's, there's just, you have to use it. It's, if I'm going to answer a question that's 1 + 1, I have to use math. I don't like math, but that doesn't make it wrong. I say this to point out because that hammer, if you look into the lore and the feat that I presented earlier, it wouldn't have only killed Ashura, it would have splattened him, right? Because it's just, scaling to something that's inherently fifth dimensional is always going to be better than someone who's bigger than the galaxy. You know what I'm saying? It's just that simple. These are IRL theoretical concepts that are vouched for by pretty much every notable scientist known to man. Kratos scales to higher dimensional powers than Ashura. Ashura could literally grow to the size of the universe, right? He would still be weaker than something that's fifth dimensional inherently, right? Just because Ashura has feats that are more spectacle focused doesn't mean that he's going to be a character who has the lore to not only beat him, but beat him like tens of thousands of times over. Kratos is just like that. And let me tell you something. Ashura's feats are more visual based because his game is more action oriented, right? God of War Ragnarok is an action oriented game. I'm not denying that, but it's more narratively focused than action based, right? I think there's a balance of that. Whereas Ashura, it's just balls to the wall explosions. So, downplaying it on the grounds of Kratos lacks the feats is kind of disingenuous. When Kratos is hindered by gameplay mechanics, you can't have Kratos walk around and throw stars because that's not the type of game that God of War is, right? But that does not disregard the canonical scaling that he has if you just read the books, watch the interviews, and just listen to what the characters say. And it's just that simple. I'm, for one, kind of surprised by Death Battle. I didn't think they had the cojones to present this fight as it actually would happen. And it was a wash. It wasn't, because that's how it would happen if they were to encounter each other. It would have been a wash, which is why I think it's a bad matchup to begin with.
No, he didn't need extra weapons and power-ups and stuff like that. Oh, in which...
Firstly, this isn't going to be a hate video. Go show King Lion some love. But the notion that Asura did not get any help and it was all his own power is just blatantly false. We forget that this whole scene happened. Asura needed the mantra from every other demigod. All the mantra that governs the world in order to get resurrected. And that's not just it. Old boy had to put his own mantra in that shit too. Top of that, without the relic and without absorbing the energy in this clip here, so we're not gonna act like my boy wasn't absorbing all this energy from his main op in order to get to his strongest form. Asura literally could not do this shit on his own, and honestly, outside of that, when you look at both their stories, it's practically the same shit. They both died countless times in order to resurrect from the dead, in order to fight a common cause, specifically a greater god. Oh no, I don't really disagree with Lion's take, just more the notion that Asura didn't get any help, because he definitely did. I don't think it's wrong to get help in order to achieve like higher levels of forms. I mean, almost every relevant character has done that at some point.
The same hammer that splintered the world tree, sweetie. He got...
I don't want to take credit for who he's responding to, but that seems pretty specific, right? And, once again, it's just more broken Ashura cope nonsense. He's on his Joker-esque monologue at this point, right? Just totally crashing out, right? He's trying to assert that Kratos wasn't hit with the Splinter World Tree ability, right? Because that's an ability that Thor's hammer has, apparently, right? Even though that's not anything that's ever stated, buddy. Thor was able to splinter the World Tree because he's that physically strong, right? And sure, you can maybe argue that he wasn't hit with force maybe comparable to that, right? There's other ways to scale him to that feat, but I'll slide with you for that logic, right? We see the feat happen at the end of God of War Ragnarok, right? When he hits the snake and it disappears, that's what splinters the World Tree, right? And then he becomes even more bloodlusted at the fact that he sees Kratos with his daughter. So if anything, this is a Thor that's more bloodlusted than when he just hit the snake and splintered the World Tree, right? And Kratos proceeds to beat that version of Thor, right? So, it's not an ability that Thor has, right? Thor is just physically that strong. There's also the fact that the snake was hit with that amount of force, right? and he was knocked out by Boulder, a character who Kratos also beat. See, there's multiple ways to scale Kratos to the splintering of the World Tree. There's also the fact that at the end of God of War Ragnarok, Freya's brother is able to temporarily hold off an attack from Surtur. Surtur, detonated Asgard, which also but shook the Yggdrasil down to its very roots. That's a character who Kratos is likely much stronger than, and he's holding off blows that are infinite fifth dimensional. Even for 30 seconds, that's still a better feat than anything Ashura could ever muster, unfortunately, my friend. He tries to bring up the headcanon that Kratos is amped by his weapons, right? And he uses a weakened Kratos that doesn't scale to the one from the end of Ragnarok, right? As confirmed by every source, right? Even Corey Barlow's like, yeah, this Kratos father, right? And he said that no one's ever mentioned this. In fact, I haven't mentioned this, right? My latest video that I posted on my channel, I had a whole section dedicated to that feat. So, once again, that's more cope. Apparently, bro blocked me, right? And not only that, he decided to make a response video, which is insane. I don't care that you blocked me. If you want to do that, then do that. But why take my video and respond to it and then have me not even be able to see it? I wouldn't have even been able to see this if not for some of my mutuals. So that's wicked. But anyways, I'm more offended that he presented my argument in a way that's disingenuous to favor his own mindset. Either that or he's just genuinely ignorant, because I gave pretty simple logic, right? I never backtracked on my initial premise or logic. I was trying to illustrate that even if I were to give into your mindset, that's not the only way I can get Kratos that high, right? That's not me backtracking. That's me explaining an alternate method to prove my point, because I don't need one point to prove whatever I'm trying to argue at any given time. So that's one. And two, you lied. You lied in your video, like explicitly.
That Kratos wasn't hit with the Splinter World Tree ability, right? Because that's an ability that Thor's hammer has, apparently, right? Even though that's not anything that's ever stated, buddy.
Now, not only did I never say that.
2 seconds earlier.
The same hammer that splintered the World Tree. Just because an item does something doesn't mean it does it all the time. Just because a character has an item that gives them a certain ability.
Y'all heard that? That's what he said. That's what I responded to. So why lie about what you said? And three, you've tried to present another premise, and you said, we don't know what Thor was doing here.
Like, we don't know what that could have been a spell or something.
That means it's pure headcanon, pure speculation, my friend. And not only that, I presented a video in my video, Thor being in a similar state, and Kratos stalemates him. Compare both clips.
He never hit Kratos with that.
So Kratos scales to Thor at that level, which was what that video was trying to say. So, he blocked me. He's not going to see this. If anyone comes from his channel to my page, just know that he is, I don't really want to attack people's character, but when you do sneaky stuff like this, it's kind of hard not to. Just know that it's weird. It's a weird activity, man. Blocking someone and then responding to them on your platform with hundreds of thousands of people and then not even give them a chance to respond. That's wicked. But, that's some people for you.